Good morning, my dear students. I am Nagendra Naik, Assistant Professor, Department of Environmental Science, Government First Grade College, Shimoga. Today, I am going to deliver a lecture on threats to the biodiversity, and the contents of a topic are threats to biodiversity, habitat loss, poaching of wildlife, man-wildlife conflicts, biological invasions, climate change, and conservation of biodiversity. Conservation of biodiversity has in situ conservation of biodiversity and ex situ conservation of biodiversity. Students, first let us know what is mean by biodiversity. The biodiversity is the variety and variability among all the living organisms from all the sources, that is terrestrial, marine and other aquatic ecosystems, including the freshwater and the marine water and ecological complexes of which they are part, and this includes diversity within the species, between the species, and of ecosystems. India is a mega diversity nation, and it is 10th among the diversity in the world because it has a lot of biodiversity due to its geographical regions. There are about 10 different zoogeographical regions, and each type of the zoogeographical regions and each type of the different habitats and biomes, they support maximum biodiversity. Thereby we have a lot of biodiversity, and India has about 13 1,36,830 species of biodiversity. Among out of that 45,000, around 45,000 are plants and 91,317 are animal. And in the world, the biodiversity is estimated to be 16 lakh 29,158 species, and it is according to an estimates, it is said that it is only 10% of, and yet 90% of the biodiversity is undiscovered or unexcavated. That is the, and there are, let us understand the biodiversity types. What are the types of biodiversity? There are three types of, basically three types of biodiversity. One is genetic diversity, another is the species diversity, and the third one is the ecosystem diversity. What is genetic diversity? Genetic diversity is the variety and variability, or the diversity within a single species. For example, dog is a single species, and we see number of varieties of dogs. That is, Swede is there, Bulldog is there, German Shepherd is there. All these are different genes, but the species is the same. That is the example for the genetic diversity. And the same paddy. The paddy is one single species, and there are 1,500 types, varieties of the paddies we see in the world. So that is, these are the examples for the genetic diversity. And next is the species diversity. Species diversity is the variety and variability between different species. We can also say a species richness of an ecosystem, or the population richness of a population. And the third one is the ecosystem diversity. There are different types of ecosystem. Each type of ecosystem, they support different types of a unique type of life on the earth. So there are hilltop is there. Hilltop is also an ecosystem. A valley is an ecosystem, and sea is the biggest and the most stable ecosystem. Sea and oceans and the rainforest, deserts, grasslands, all these are the different ecosystems, and each type of the ecosystem, they support their own type of the organisms. Thereby there are different types of ecosystem. We see there are ecosystem diversity we see on the earth. Let us start with the risk causes for the biodiversity threats. Let us talk about the threats to the biodiversity. And one of the major threat to the biodiversity is the habitat loss. So a habitat is an ecological or environmental area that is inhabited by a particular species of animal, plant, or other type of organisms. So it is a place or the area where the organisms, specific type of organisms, are thriving. So one of the major responsible the reason for the habitat loss is the mining. So we see a lot of mining in the forest areas and other forest areas, and mountains and hills have been they have swept, they have, because of the mining activity. We see a lot of mining activities the went on for the went on the, like Kudremukh. Kudremukh is the best example, where it is in the heart of the Western Ghats, and Kematgundi and Ballari is one of the example where lot of thousands of hectares of forest are lost due to the mining activity. And Anandpur, that is in Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, where iron mining and coal mining are took place, where the lots, thousands of lakhs together hectares of forest went in the mining activities. So and Amazon is one of the example. Today it is a biggest threat to the biodiversity, because Amazon is considered as the lung space. It is the lung of the universe world, but because of this mining activity, various different companies from throughout the world and going there and mining for different minerals, and that is a biggest threat to the habitat loss. And in Australia, for example, and South Africa, gold mining. You see the gold mining, a lot of the forest area have been lost due to this mining activity. And next, the cause for the habitat loss is the overgrazing. So the meat eating habit, and in order to produce more milk products, so overgrazing is done. The cattle, piggeries, poultry are grazed. So overgrazing leads to loss of a habitat, because the continuous and frequent grazing leads to the loss of this habitat loss. That is the forest. It might be the forest or the grassland. See, today almost all the grasslands and forests have been threatened, due to the overgrazing in the world. For example, Australia, in Australian grasslands, they are been decreasing. They are becoming desertification. We see desertification in Savannah, Kalahari, and Sahara Desert. We see the example. Sahara Desert, every year hundreds of kilometers of Sahara Desert is increasing due to the overgrazing. In India also, we see the effect of overgrazing in north western part of the India, northwestern part. So where Gujarat, Rajasthan part of, and other parts, the overgrazing leading to the loss of the leading to the desertification. And this is because the meat production, that 1 kg, for example, 1 kg meat production, it requires around 50 to 100 kg of green will be lost on the earth in the process of production of meat. And that is 1 kg meat production, it requires around 15,000 liters of water. As a result, this overgrazing, the meat eating habit leading to the overgrazing, and overgrazing leading to the loss of the habitat, and finally the desertification. In India, 32% of the land area is in the process of the desertification, and one of the main reason is the overgrazing. And another, the problem is the dam construction. So for for the habitat loss, so dams, when we construct a dam, that the whole lot of area, that is the low lying good forest area, that will submerge into the this dam, the backwater. That is the main reason why there is habitat loss due to the dam construction. And we see a lot of, in India almost all the rivers have been built with dams, the small, big and very large dams. For example, this Sardar Sarovar, they recently built it alone, that submerges about 43 more than 45,000 hectares of the forest area. In district of Shimoga and Chikmagalur itself, a lot of dams have been constructed, and thousands and lakhs together hectares of forest are submerged into the uh, dams or the backwater, and thereby dam construction is a biggest problem to the habitat loss, especially the forest, good forest area. Next, we'll go to the commercial fishing. So fishing is a industry today. Fishing exhaustively fishing is done, and that fishing leads to gives 60% of the protein supplement, especially in the seas and the ocean. That bottom crawling and the commercial bottom crawling, dredging, all these are the main responsible for the this fishing, over harvesting of the fishing. These days we can see throughout the world, in the oceans we see the dead zones where where the fish population is almost declined, or somewhere it is zero in some places. Maximum places of the oceans in the world, and that is the one of the commercial fishing is also responsible for the loss of biodiversity. It is a threat to the biodiversity and loss of habitat. And another reason for the habitat loss is the plantation. Plantation is done, the monocultivation. In India, the generally, for example, generally this acacia, eucalyptus, that is the nilgiri, what we say, and casuarina, rubber, tea and coffee are exhaustively grown as a plantation crops. And these plantation crops are these are monocrops, we say monocultivation. And this monocultivation of these plants leads to the elimination of the native species of the this one, plants and medicinal plants, animals, etc. Especially the in plantations, the nilgiri, that is the eucalyptus and acacia, they are invasive species also. These invasive species, they have been brought from other countries, and they have become responsible for the destruction of this local biodiversity of plants and animals also. Next, we'll go to the agriculture. So, agriculture, India is highly populated country. As the population grows, the need for the agriculture land is also increasing, and the only place we find in India, the people find in India, are the grazing lands and the forest. So forests have been encroached with the practice of the agriculture. Earlier, the zoom cultivation or shifting cultivation are carried. Because of these sort of agricultural practices, we have lost maximum forest. But these days, after the settlements, agriculture land is growing like anything, and that is engulfing and encroaching the forest, and that is has become a main threat to the loss of biodiversity. Let us next the we'll talk about the one of the reason for the habitat loss is the forestry. The forestry practice in India is not followed properly. That is, so what we have to do, only we need to protect the present, the available and the present forest. Instead, the policies and our now this what we are doing, we are planting every year. We see, usually we see planting of the saplings in the forest. In fact, it is not required, only we need to give is the protection. The mother earth has an enormous potential, so it will grow itself the native species what it requires. Instead, what we are doing, we are going and planting, and we saying it is a forestry activity. In fact, this is also one of the reason for the loss of the habitat. Next, we'll move to the there are various types of habitat we see. There is a forest, and we see the what we believe is the forest is the only habitat for the this one biodiversity. But there are grasslands, wetlands, the various types of wetlands we see. Bogs are there, marshes are there, swamps are there. So the Amazon wetlands, that is marshes, that where we see the anaconda and other fish, anaconda snakes and other various types of fishes and plants. They are and birds. It gives a shelter to the birds. And mangroves are very important. This one habitat for the biodiversity. We see a lot of shrimps, the crabs, fish biodiversity, and these are of very highly economic value also. These mangroves are especially are no. They are, we are using mangroves especially for the firewood and this encroachment activities. These are really wonderful. This one habitat that is between sea water and the fresh water, where submerged, where the rivers merge to the sea. And mountains are also very important, the habitats, because there are specific type of life exists on the top of the mountains and hills, etc. Thereby it is also a wonderful habitat. But we ignore as this mountains and these as a habitat. When we consider habitat, oceans are all is a most stable aquatic ecosystem. It is a it inhabits 90% of the biodiversity on the earth. So islands are also the habitat for the island, for the biodiversity. But what we do, we feel only the forests are the habitat for the biodiversity, and we ignore all these sorts of the habitats. But we have to protect all the water bodies, wetlands, mangroves, mountains, islands, everything, in order to maintain the protect the biodiversity. Otherwise we lose the biodiversity. In fact, already we have lost half of the biodiversity. And the forest, especially the tropical rainforest, that they have 50% of the world biodiversity, and we are losing that forest today. And one of the such forests we have in India, that is the Western Ghats. In parts of the Western Ghats, we have rainforest, and Amazon is one of the example of that rainforest. And the deserts also this habitat for the biodiversity. A specific type of the biodiversity that exists in the deserts also. We cannot neglect desert as a now barren area. It is also having some sort of the biodiversity, and we have to protect them. Next, that is poaching of wildlife. So poaching of wildlife is nothing but illegal capturing or killing of the animals. That is a specific threats to certain animals are related to large economic benefits. There is a large economic benefit in poaching of the wild animals. So in China and Southeast Asian countries, like Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, they use these eating of meat eating is a fancy, and they feel it's a passionate to eat the meat of wildlife, various types of wildlife, and they use the medicines. For that purpose, the animals are poached throughout the world and shifted to transfer, and they are exported to these countries, and thereby we are losing lot of biodiversity. That is, for example, skins, bones, and pelt hair from the tiger. So many tigers are killed. That is, Bengal tiger and Asiatic tigers have been killed, are killing because of these things. And where there are only few tigers are left over in the world. So ivory from the elephants, the African elephants are there and Asiatic elephants are there. Both the elephants are killed only for the purpose of the ivory, and that ivory is exported for the some making ornaments or in ornaments or something, and we are losing that huge the alien that organism animal for the silly regions. The horns from the rhinos and the perfume from the musk deer are the examples. So rhinos in we see Kaziranga is the national park where we see the rhinos, and these rhinos have been are killed for the that horn, and that horn is sold in thousands of dollars, and the musk deer is killed for the sake of the perfume, making the perfume, and bears are killed for their gall bladders. Corals, and we see the selling of corals and shells in beaches. It is a common practice where in the beaches, the areas of the beaches, coastal area, they sell these corals, precious corals and shells, and there is an unsustainable harvest is being done, and we are losing our valuable corals and shells. A variety of wild plants with real or at time medicinal value are being over harvested. So we see the over harvesting of these medicinal plants, the like Raulfia, Naxumica, Datura, Sandalwood, Rosewood are the examples. We today we cannot see as we rarely, these are endemic and critically endangered, have become critically endangered species, and we hardly see these species in the wild. So collection of garden plants includes orchids, ferns, and mosses. This has become a practice these days. These gardeners and nursery are collecting the orchids, ferns, beautiful orchids, ferns, and mosses from the forest and their native places, and they are they are reared and they are sold. This has become a big market today. And in India, the Himalayan region have the 1200 varieties of orchids, and in Western Ghats we have around 900 variety species of the orchids, and they are under threat. Really, they are under threat, and they have become the critically endangered species, and some are already extinct. Biological invasions. What is a biological invasion? So biological invasion is the invading, bringing of the alien plants or animals from other country or other places to the native places. So what happens when a invaded plant or the animal that won't that flourishes like anything in the native environment, and that disturbs the growth of the native plant. For example, we have epitorium, and we have lantana, we have common water hyacinth, we have congress grass or parthenium we call, and one of the fish, the famous fish these days, that is the African catfish. So what happens? This epitorium have been brought from the America, that is growing in India. That is a moist places of India. That is it has occupied its place in Western Ghats and the northern and Himalayan regions also. So it has become a big problem to the biodiversity because it is supporting the forest fire during the rainy season it grows and flourishes, and during summer it dries up, and it will easily help to lit the fire and leading to the forest fire. That is the problem of the eupatorium in India. And the forest department are spending lakhs together, crores together to to eradicate this eupatorium, but it is has become menace. And another species is the lantana. Lantana camara is a common species in India. It is also from the America, United Nations. So lantana has become a biggest problem in the semi-arid and the areas and the semi-arid regions of India. It is inhibiting other plant species, the herbal species, to grow, and this plant movement it also acting as a this one obstacle for the movement of the animals, especially the elephant, tigers, the mammals, big mammals especially, and the carnivore species. So because it goes extensively and makes bushes, the animals cannot able to move freely. That is the problem, and it's also contributing to the forest fire, and also this local species also being inhibited by the lantana. That is the problem due to the invasive species, that is lantana, and the biodiversity, our biodiversity. And common water hyacinth that has come from the Amazon basin, and we see everywhere in the water bodies in India, the ponds, lakes, marshes, bogs, every water body is filled with the water hyacinth. And in the process of eutrophication, that is the enrichment of the nutrients in the water bodies, and that leads to the death of the water bodies, that is the ponds and lakes. And this water hyacinth is contributing maximum to this process of eutrophication, and exhaustively it is growing and covering the water bodies, leading to the killing of the water bodies, and also inhibits growth of the other useful plant species, that is lily and other lotus lily, other species also. And we know the congress grass or the parthenium, we usually called, it is also from the American country. It is also become a big problem. The inflorescence of this plant that easily spreads into the air, and leading to the problem of this asthmatic problem or bronchitis. So this is the biggest problem, and it is growing, spreading throughout India, and it has become highly impossible to stop the growth of this parthenium. The one of the main reason why we these invasive or alien species grow here in the native in means because the no organism having the habit of eating these, because the stomach of these organisms, they don't have the digestive enzymes or the bacteria, they thereby any no organisms eat or feed these invasive species, thereby without any disturbance they grow like anything and they flourishes, and that will become a problem to our native species, and these will become the threat to our biodiversity. African catfish is also one of the fish that has been introduced from the Africa, where we see this catfish in India in maximum ponds and water bodies, freshwater bodies, and that African catfish eating our native fish species, and that is become a greatest threat and the problem to our native species. In some parts of the India, almost all the native species of fish have been eradicated or extinct due to this African catfish, because they feed all the remaining fishes. And this is about the biological threats due to the biological invasions of the species. Next is the man-wildlife conflict. Man-wildlife conflict occurs when animal pose a direct and recurring threat to the livelihood or safety of people, leading to the persecution of that species. So retaliation against the species blamed often ensues, leading to the conflict about what should be done to remedy the situation. So when the problems comes with the coexistence, when the wild animals and the human, due to the population explosion in India especially, this we are happen to share the same habitats or the places or areas for the livelihood. When this becomes, when there are plantations or agricultural plants, roads, railway lines in the natural habitat where the wild animals they live, then it will become a problem to the livelihood of this wildlife, and they starve of the food and different problems, and they fight against the people. They pose a threat to the people for the livelihood and their safety, living, everything. Then it will become a conflict between the wildlife and the man. The common examples for the man wildlife conflict are the elephants entry of the destroying of the plantation crops by the and elephants and bisons, that is the bisons entering into the paddy field in the western ghats. Recently we are now facing a lot of these problems due to the elephants in Chamarajnagar and parts of in Mysore and parts of western ghats. The elephant and man conflict has increased enormously, enormously. Tigers, leopards are also entering into the villages, and sometime in Bombay we have heard of the news about the leopard living in these apartments, and in parts of Karnataka and Maharashtra, leopards are they're taking away the cattle, sheep, etc., and snakes entering into the houses and living areas. Pigs destroying the field crops, that is become problem. Deer. So one of the best example is the black buck in the semi-arid regions of India. The black buck that throws, where that is the due to the this the protective measures, their number have been increased these days, and that has become a problem, and they are entering into the field crops, and there becomes the conflict between the man and the deer. And this is one sort of example. Primates, sharks, seal, prey birds of prey, praying birds, they are also become uh, so crocodiles, rhinos, otters, these things. There is a conflict between the man and the wildlife. So one of the reason for the man wildlife conflict is habitat loss again, and the fragmentation and encroachment of the habitats, encroachment of the forest and their natural habitat, and this is leading to the loss of biodiversity, and these are the threats to the this has become a threat to the biodiversity. Next, the climate change. Climate change is also one of the reason for the loss of biodiversity or the threat of the biodiversity, because the climate change completely distracts the pattern of the this meteorological pattern, because wind blow and rainy seasons, the time and the pattern of the rainfall. For example, when a first rain showers in the summer, this germinates, plants will germinate, seeds will germinate, and if there is a gap, 1 or 2 month gap between these another rainfall, then the germinated that seeds will die. And that is the reason why there is a continuous and average rainfall is a good, but due to the climate change there is a the huge gap between the rainfall to the rainfall. Either heavy see the extreme rainfall, or the next it is continued with the drought, and these are the problems. And due why we are losing biodiversity due to the climate change. And already the high temperature, the areas with high temperature, the average temperature is increasing, this leading to the more and more increase in the temperature of the already this highly the areas with more temperature, and this leading and the temperature more than 40 degrees Celsius, that is a negative effect on the growth of the plants, and this leads to the elimination of the biodiversity from those areas. And then uh, let us come to the conservation part of the biodiversity. So we have learned what are the reasons or causes for the threat to the biodiversity, and we need to conserve our biodiversity. In fact, otherwise there is a food web which maintains. If there is no food web or the maintained, if there is biodiversity, there will food web operates. If there is breakage in the food chain or the food web, there will be a drastic problem. Changes will occur, and that will lead to the that will lead to the food security of the world, and the path of the mineral paths and everything, the rainfall pattern, everything is will be the disturbed thereby. For not the sake of the animals or the other plants and animals, but at least for our sake, for the survival of the human being on the earth, we must conserve our biodiversity. Otherwise, with the loss of biodiversity, we will the human race will be lost on the earth. Thereby it is very important to conserve our biodiversity. And there are two methods, basic methods of conservation of the biodiversity. One is the ex situ conservation. So that ex situ conservation is means conserving biodiversity outside the areas where they naturally occur. So when this conservation is not possible in their native habitat, they are brought to the other places in the other places, and they are given protection, and in the captive they are reared, and their breeding is ensured. That is the ex situ conservation. And executive conservation of the biodiversity includes the zoological parks. We usually call parks or the zoos. Zoos we say that, and there are number of zoos in India, like Mysore Zoo or the Delhi Zoo, which is the biggest zoo in India, where these animals which are threatened and endangered to their life are brought, and they are been made captive and ensure their breeding in the zoos in order to education and entertainment purposes. In order to protect these, it is one of the method, exitive method of the conserving the biodiversity, though it is not suggested a good method, but it is still there in the practice in order to conserve the biodiversity in ex situ method. And another method is the safaris. Safaris are the areas or the places where the in which the animals are brought in, and they are left in the captive or the within the fencing, where these are preserved. Animals are preserved, given protection for their the continuous breeding and their survival of the gene pool. And we see different safaris, that is a lion safari, tiger safari, deer safari, crocodile safari. There are different types of safaris, especially for the different organisms. And safaris is a practice is made only mainly for the educational and the recreation purposes. And botanical gardens, these are the gardens where the highly endangered and endemic species of the plants have been brought and grown and ensured their protection. These are the that is called the botanical gardens, and it is one of the executive method of the conserving the biodiversity of the plants, especially the plant species. Seed banks, we see seed banks in the government of India, and also state government are having a number of seed banks. Though we in India we have practice of keeping and protecting the native species of the seeds in every household. The agriculture, the farmers usually do this practice where we preserve and protect our the native and the original seeds. That is how we maintain seed banks in every households. And next is the gene banks. Gene banks are the banks where the especially the plants are the parts of the plants are cut, the plants with which are endangered and critically endangered. These plants are endemic species. They are brought, the parts of the plants are brought and they are preserved in the cold storages minus 300 degrees Celsius, and for the future generation. And these genes have been stored, and further when the time comes they are multiplied by using different techniques, and that is how we maintain the genes of the present the endangered and endemic species of the plants community biodiversity. And next, horticultural and recreational gardens. In horticultural and recreational garden also we grow the varieties of the plants which are very rare, endemic and extend. In this way we conserve our biodiversity in ex situ conservation method. The next is the in situ conservation method of conserving the biodiversity. So conserving the animals and plants in their natural habitat, where in their native habitat or natural habitat itself they are given protection, and with the different assigning different names they are conserved. And one of such method is the national designating the national parks. So there are about 104 national parks in India, and there are 5 national parks in Karnataka. That is Anasi, Dandeli, Bannerghatta, Kudremukh are the national parks in Karnataka. National parks are the larger area, the ecosystems where a clear boundary has been fixed, and this is it has a different zones, that is core zone and the buffer zone, where in national parks no human activity or the forestry or non-forestry activities are entirely prohibited. Exception is there with the higher permission. Only for the research purpose is allowed for the buffer zone, but not in the core zone. So national parks are there. There and in the national parks the mammals here, the both flora and fauna both are both are protected, but the more emphasis is given on the higher mammals, that is bison, tiger, elephants, and these are no more stress is given on these, but also all these plants and animals are protected, and no human activity, no activity is allowed. Other activity, housing, railway line, everything is prohibited in the national park. Then let us talk about the wildlife sanctuary. It is also one of the in situ conservation method of the biodiversity, where wildlife is conserved or protected in the native areas. And there are about 551 wildlife sanctuaries in India, and there are 21 wildlife sanctuaries in Karnataka. So there is a slight difference between the national park with the wildlife. In national parks have the clear the boundaries, but wildlife sanctuaries don't have clear boundaries, and there are with the permission some activity is allowed in the wildlife sanctuary. That is a some forest people, some people reside inside the wildlife sanctuaries, and the forestry and non-forestry activity with the permission is also allowed in the wildlife sanctuary, but it should not but it should not affect the wildlife. In that way some activities are allowed with the permission, and in the wildlife sanctuary there is no clear cut boundary is mentioned. And this is all about the wildlife sanctuary. Next, biosphere reserves. Biosphere reserves are the larger areas where the whole ecosystem is protected, given protected, including that soil, water, the atmosphere, flora, fauna, everything is considered and protected. It comes under the UNESCO. UNESCO considers these biosphere reserves, and there are 18 biosphere reserves in India. And in Karnataka we have only one biosphere reserve, that is a Nilgiri biosphere reserve, that three states shares that area, that is Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Kerala, Wayanadu, and Nilgiri, and this two national parks, that is also comes under the this Nilgiri, Bandipura and Nagarhole within the this Nilgiri biosphere reserve. These are the larger areas. Most of the time we see one or two national parks or wildlife sanctuaries within the this biosphere reserves, that is Bandipura and Nagarhole, both the national parks in the biosphere reserve. These are the very large vast areas where everything, flora, fauna, atmosphere, soil, even microorganisms completely protected. And this is one of the where the core in it is also having the buffer zone and the core zone. In buffer zone the human settlements and other activities are allowed, whereas in the core zone nothing is allowed. In forestry, non-forestry activity, nothing is allowed in the biosphere reserves. And the reserve forests are the designated forests where they are reserved by the state government for the specific purposes. So in reserve forest no human activity or the entry is allowed without the permission. These are the smaller areas than the national parks, wildlife sanctuaries. If more protection is to be given, they can be enhanced to the national parks also in the future for the further protections. And protected forests, the what the difference, main protected forest also also the designated forest where the people are allowed to harvest the NTF, non-timber forest producers, or other activity can also be allowed with for the forest fringe areas and the local areas, local people, whereas in the reserve forest nothing is allowed, whereas then in protected forest in a limited amount the activities, the collection of NTFE and other activities, people collecting the firewood is also allowed. And that's all about the biodiversity, threats to the biodiversity. And we must protect our biodiversity because we have already lost our biodiversity due to the reasons or the causes what I have mentioned. And if there is no biodiversity and there is no plant, there is no animal, it is highly difficult to live the human being or the earth. So in order to stay alive, survive on the earth, the human being, we must protect our biodiversity, otherwise we will, and the habitats, everything, otherwise we won't survive. And with that I conclude my topic, this threats to the biodiversity. Thank you. Thank you.